I am here with Jenny from Acts435. Hello, Jenny.
Hi, Andy. Good to be here.
Now, Acts435, we've had you on before. We spoke to one of your colleagues, which was fantastic hearing about their journey and their journey into what you're doing. But Acts435, just give us a really brief overview. What is it and what does it do?
So Acts435 is an online giving charity. It comes from Acts chapter 4, verse 35 in the Bible, where they gave to anyone in need. But essentially, we're extending that across the UK. So we work with partner churches and charities who post requests for people in need in their communities. And then people from across the country can give to meet those specific needs, which, is a win-win because we're resourcing churches and charities for free. But donors also love the fact that it's so direct, and the £10 they give towards someone's cooker in Liverpool will go directly to his cooker.
I was reading a report the other day, and it was somebody, basically they were having a bit of a rant, I think is how I would describe this particular newspaper article, having a rant about the fact that, look at these big national charities, their CEOs are on £250,000 a year, and they're complaining that people aren't giving, but is the reason why people aren't giving because they're taking £250,000 of said giving. And they were having a bit of a rant. And my thought was, well, if you're going to want the best people, you have to pay for it. And I genuinely get that argument. They have to live in London. It's more expensive. Okay, I get that. But I also get the perspective of people giving, saying, yeah, but if I'm giving you £1, how much of that pound is actually going to the charity and how much is going to the pension pot for the CEO who's earning a lot of money? So how, first of all, what are your thoughts on that one? This was a rant in a newspaper the other day.
I think, do they have to be in London? No. I really think we love the fact that our charity is based in York, and there's quite a few charities, Christian charities in particular, based up here across the north, Bradford, Manchester and stuff. So that's really good. Obviously, there's a demand. I think charity jobs, when people work for a charity, they expect to be paid less than they would be paid in the commercial world. That's part of your commitment to wanting to do that. But interestingly, when Acts435 was started, it was the idea of Julian Richer, who's a businessman and a successful entrepreneur. But he saw it. He saw that people who are giving a small amount of money, that they were fed up of not knowing where on earth that money was going. He's like, what the demand is here is that donors can see what happens if they've only got £5 or £10 to give in a really direct way. And that's why our massive USP and commitment is 100% goes, we pay for the credit card fee that they are, that we obviously incur when they make a donation, because we want to make sure that all the money goes. And the wonderful thing is that we've been self-sustaining on gift aid since 2015. We started in 2009. And that means that sometimes we can use our gift aid to then continue to meet those needs. So it's over and above, really, ensuring that money goes to where it needs to. And the other thing that we particularly love is that once the person's got their washing machine or their school uniform or their bus pass, and they say what a difference it's made, the advocate, that's the name we give for our church and charity partners, the advocate can post that thank you, which goes back to those donors. So not only are we being told that they're giving and it will go straight to that person, but then they get that thank you to say, wow, what a difference it's made. I'm no longer traipsing to the laundrette. I can't believe I've got my own washing machine. And, it just encourages them to give again, which is a good model.
Which is something that I loved when I first heard about not just what you do, but specifically the how you do it. I thought, this is beautiful. This is so not normal in a wonderful way, because we can all see, oh, that's a good charity. We'll do what they do. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with looking at what other people are doing and what works. But I like the fact, and this is what I fell in love with your charity, really, is you're not just trying to do what everyone else is doing. And I especially loved the fact that, as you said, it's that direct giving. I have a need. I need to have a washing machine. Can you help? Okay, here's £250, washing machine bought. It's so beautifully simple in its elegance and directness.
We think so, and I just wish more churches and charities would partner with us. So if you're listening today and think, oh, how do we get involved? It's completely free, and we're really committed to that, because we think that churches and charities working with those in need are doing an incredible job. For us, it's a privilege to be able to resource them, but most people, they can only do so much. So a food bank is helping people with food. Then they hear about someone who's sleeping on the floor because the bed's broken and they can't afford it. But they can't do anything about that because they're a food bank. And that's where we're like, well, and you can help. And the wonderful news is that lots of people want to help. It's been wonderful to see £80,000 given most months of individual people going onto our website who want to help,
which is phenomenal. And as I say, that's the bit I really liked, because it is that direct help. Many years ago, we found ourselves suddenly without a job. We had to go to a food bank, and it was really hard to cross the threshold of this beautiful church building with some lovely folk. But we were in crisis, right? So we're like, we have no money. We have 3 children. We can't put the heating on. We've suddenly arrived. We spent loads of money to get to a job. That job has then fallen apart. And now we're kind of stuffed. We got no job. We got rent we can't pay. We've just got a brand new contract on that. So that's not going to suddenly stop. And then we went to a food bank, and they were so lovely and kind. Because of the heating systems we had, they couldn't help us with the heating in the end, and that's fine. But they gave us the food we needed. And it was the fact they smiled while they did it and didn't make us feel like anything other than they had the privilege of being able to help other people. And that privilege part for them, not for us, in a good way, I think that's what helped defeat some of the barriers and the issues and the pride that we had of, but we've always paid our way in life, and now we're going to a food bank. But like you say, they had the privilege, and it was that we love helping you, and that's the bit that shone through, which defeated all of our own issues walking into such a difficult situation and place.
It's amazing, and what a story! And there's so many community heroes day by day connecting with people in their community, and people fall into hardship for all kinds of reasons, and that's what we love about Acts435. We step in whatever the need. If there's a need there that needs to be met, then put it on our website and see if people want to give, and they do.
We can come back to this particulars about all that a little bit later, but I know that Acts435 is something you're a little bit passionate about. So just give us a little bit. Let's go back in time. What's your journey of faith? Because you're talking about Acts, which is a book in the Bible. So what's your own faith journey? And let's work then to how you came up with Acts435.
Yes, of course. So I became a Christian when I was 18. So I was at a Church of England school. Funnily enough, the same school that my son is now doing his GCSEs at, which I never would have thought we'd come full circle. But yeah, I became a Christian through a friend at sixth form college, who invited me to a guest service. Churches put these on, and they work. Invited me to a guest service at their youth group. Went along. It was in the run up to Christmas, and sort of thought, I'm doing great at school, everything's fine, but what's the point of it all? That was really my kind of starting point. I wasn't in a crisis. I was always going well. I was about to go off to university, but I just thought, actually, what is the point of just working really hard and getting great A levels, and where am I going? And because it was a run up to Christmas as well, it was that perfect timing. And so the funny thing is that I just went to this youth service, thought, okay, I should look into this. Picked up my Bible, started reading it, and about 3 or 4 weeks later said to my friend who'd invited me, I've become a Christian. So it was a really she was like, whoa, and never looked back, really. I think for me, because that was then sort of 8 months before I then went off to university, so I was baptised in the July of that year, and it just gave me that framework, I suppose, was the first place. And it's like, okay, yeah. And because I've had a lot of the training and teaching through school, suddenly it all just, the Holy Spirit moved, and everything clicked into place. Like, oh yeah, okay, this is Jesus, who I already know about, but now it's a heart thing. And I want to spend the rest of my life following him.
So university, what did you study there?
Well, I went to do maths, but I actually went to Cambridge University, and maths at Cambridge is extremely difficult. I mean, you've got the maths geniuses of the world going there. So having found A levels straightforward, I was like, this is not, I don't think I should be here. And I genuinely thought I shouldn't be there at Cambridge, because I thought, oh, it's because I've come from a state school in the north and I'm a woman that they've given me this opportunity. So I was like, I think I need to go and do maths somewhere else, because I was struggling. And they said, well, no, don't you like it here? I'm like, yes, it's lovely. I said, well, just change subjects. So I had this crazy week where I looked at all these other subjects, like, oh, shall I do music? Shall I do English? And I thought, what I really want to do is theology. And so that's what I did. So I changed and did 2 years theology, which I knew I wanted to go into accountancy. And it didn't matter what your degree was in. You just started studying a lot more about my faith, having supervisions with kind of some of the places there that are training people up for ordination and things like that. And yeah, that was. And then I actually stayed in Cambridge for another year and did some work at my church before heading in to get more exams in the accountancy world.
Fine. So, have you spent a long time doing accountancy, or was that sort of something you sort of glanced in and came out of? How does that fit into the life?
So that fits in as that I told my friends I'm going in, I'm doing my 3 years and then get me out of the rat race. This is not where my heart is. And I pretty much stayed to it. I was there 3 years, 2 months. And just before I'd gone to the Dominican Republic with Tear Fund and done one of their sort of short-term projects and just really felt a call to Latin America. Fell in love with Spanish and just that. You know, what happened there was a realization that I didn't have to be a doctor or a nurse to serve God overseas. I think I'd seen it as those were the classic ones. And I met some people there who said, no, you know, they need accountants and people who can run charities out on the mission field. So I came back to London, studied to be an accountant, all the way thinking this is a means to an end, continuing to develop that call. God placed me in a wonderful church in London that then became my sending church, learned Spanish, so that then after that I went out to Guatemala for 6 years, working at a children's home.
So lots of the parts of your life then sort of coming together. I can kind of see where this is probably going. And I don't know, which is exciting, but I can kind of assume this. So you've been to university. I'm going to do maths. You change that slightly. You then go abroad. You've been an accountant. How then did you end up creating what we as Acts435?
435, yeah. So I went out to Guatemala originally for 2 years and was just doing accountancy stuff, so helping with this at a children's home. And within 1 year, I was asked if I would take over in running it because the missionary couple that were doing it were just felt that they needed to go back to the States. So I was sort of thrust into leadership, I guess, and learned quickly and made lots of mistakes because I was young. But you know, it was an amazing time. We had a girls' home for girls that had been abused mostly, so that they weren't necessarily orphans. They were with us for their protection. But we also started a kind of daycare centre, which is now a school for boys and girls in a really rural area of Guatemala. I met my husband while I was out there through our church, and so we really was committed to Guatemala for the long haul, to be honest, and international development. That's where I saw my place. But God just had other plans, and He started speaking to us at the beginning of 2008. Yes. And just, I mean, the work was tough. It's tough working with girls who've been abused, a lot of challenges to face, and just feeling like maybe I would move to something else. And God just speaking to both of us separately that maybe it was good to come to the UK to start a family. Is very dangerous. Guatemala and the whole of Central America, very dangerous. Difficult place to bring up children. So we felt God kind of call us back here at the end of 2008, which is not the best time as accountants to move back to the UK. There were no jobs. But you know what? God was so in it because about a year or so later, all the visa requirements changed and we couldn't have come as we did. I wouldn't have been able to come with my husband by 2010 because the visa requirements changed. So we were able to come with no jobs. My parents were our guarantors. I was pregnant. But God was so faithful. And what happened in 2009 is that there was a small notice put in a church in York. It wasn't the church I was at, mind you, but it was where someone else was. My little boy was 3 weeks old. And this lady called us and said, there's a notice in our church bulletin saying part-time bookkeeper wanted for new charity. Okay. So I called the person who said, I don't know why they've put my name on. You need to talk to the Archbishop of York. Okay. So anyway, I actually talked to his wife, Margaret Sentamu, and she said, oh, you've just had a baby. Well, you can't possibly come to us. I'll come to you. So suddenly I've got the Archbishop's wife in our little 2 up, 2 down with my husband trying to keep our son quiet upstairs, and I was the only one who responded to that advert. And she said, "Well, basically, it's actually we're kind of fronting it, but the idea is of Julian Richer, come and get involved." And it was very much sort of pick things up and drive things forward, and has been life-changing, because then I got to meet Julian, who is a man with many ideas, who's set up many charities, and I've been involved with him in 3 different charities now. And also while I was at the Palace, there was a time where I was working for the Archbishop as accounts manager as well. But you never know what happens when you respond to these small little announcements, which, I said I'm a chartered accountant rather than bookkeeper, but my background's in charities and I need a job.
Jenny Richer, then that's Richer Sounds, which is what I would think of.
Yes, indeed.
We bought a TV off them not long ago because they are and always have been about quality and getting the job done with keeping it simple and on target and on point, which I'm assuming, knowing the little bit of tiny bit I do about Richer Sounds, I see some similarities now in Acts435 of keeping to the point, keep it simple, and get people connected to the thing they actually want.
Exactly. I mean, he's a complete legend and has written books about how to treat your staff well so they treat people well. But it's that same idea of, as you say, like, here's a need. So donors want to know where their money's going. And there's lots of people who fall through the net. And they, it obviously got worse over the last 15 years with the cost of living crisis, the pandemic, austerity. But there's always going to be people who fall through the gaps. How can we connect them in a straightforward way? And the other charities I've been involved in is he looks at antisocial behaviour and victims not getting the support they needed, and how can we just set up a really effective website and support for them. And more recently, a charity called the Good Business Charter, which is about responsible businesses. And again, just last week, we had a meeting with him and just looking at how we make it as streamlined and accessible and the best customer, the best user journey possible. And it's those same principles that he brings into the charity world.
I like the fact that in a church somewhere was a little teeny tiny advert. I can picture it in my head, slightly scrappy and tatty with pieces of paper probably covering it over it. Someone's written a phone number on it because they didn't see anything else. And you ring it, and I love this bit. The number that was on the thing was the wrong person, the wrong number. I mean, vaguely the right area, the Church of England, kind of. But I like the fact they were able to connect you to the right person. I love that.
It is amazing, and I don't get tired of telling the story, really, because it just came out of the blue. We were totally focused on learning to be parents, and then suddenly this came, and it's been, it's an absolute joy because I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is when we first came to Britain and it was tough, I was like, well, maybe we'll go back overseas somewhere else. Maybe there's like a charity job for me. But actually it was that realization that there is poverty right here in the UK. And yes, it's different. In Guatemala, if you don't work, there is literally nothing. I mean, you see horrible situations, disabled people begging in the middle of the highway, hoping that the drivers will give them a bit of money. But there's desperate poverty here as well, and people really struggling. And thankfully, there's also all these people who want to help. And so it made me realise that there's plenty I can do here on that same mission of helping those in need.
I also love the fact that with a new baby, the wife of the Archbishop of York, as was John sent to me, she comes to you. I mean, I've only known bits of him. I had a friend who was a vicar in his area, and he's just a lovely chap. He's fun, and that sounds like the kind of character I've heard described time and time again. But I love the fact that I can just see your husband again. I can picture it. Your husband trying to keep your little child 3 weeks, trying to keep it quiet. I mean, like that's ever going to happen. But and I guess you probably wouldn't have cared if I've got to go and sort my child out. I think that would have been probably okay.
You probably would have been, but at that moment you're just like, whoa, this feels so out of the norm.
But out of all that, we've now got what we see as Acts435. So you said 2009, you talked about Julian Richer being involved, I guess, in the conception of what is now Acts435. How have you developed it over the last, 16 years? You've talked about the growing need, austerity, COVID, and all the rest of it. And yes, there is a desperate need in the United Kingdom at this time. We are not the rich nation that we perhaps would like to think we are. We can have some very nice posh cars and, big ships and all the rest of it, but there's absolute poverty, which I've seen. I've shared this before many times on air, but we used to work and live in Andover in Hampshire, and it's got one of the greatest disparities of wealth separation is how I would describe it. You've got people in the area living around you in these tens of £1 million mansions, which are phenomenal to even consider exist as real places for a person to live. And then in the middle of Andover, you've got a primary school where we worked, where the kids come to school sometimes without shoes. And you think that I don't think you can get much more of a disparity in the UK today. And it's kind of forgotten about because it's not quite Winchester, which is down the road, and it's sort of forgotten about. But the level of poverty that we would see of single parents in particular. So we run a holiday club and we'd have children coming. Yeah, we're going back to our mum now. I'm like, we can't release you to walk 2 miles to your mum. We'll walk you there. So we got 2 of our staff to go and walk them there. The mum was almost in tears thinking, you did this for me. My children came safely. I just assumed they'd have to try and cross. These are little kids. These are big roads. I just assumed they'd have to do it. And I think that's the thing about Christian faith. So much of what we can do doesn't have to be big and grand and complicated. So much what we can do, and I've said this for years in the front of churches, a lot of what God has put in us, we can easily use without having to put a great deal of effort. I mean, your background is accountancy. You're now working in, not quite in finance, but it's not a giant leap from accountancy looking after the books to trying to help people who need money to get money to people who need money. And I love how God ties these, in a sense, simple things of the knowledge that you've gained that you can use over here. I love that.
He's amazing. He knows everything, doesn't he? But the tapestry he weaves, and then when I look as a parent, what would be my advice for the children? Well, it's just do the next step, and God weaves it all together in incredible ways, and it's exciting. It's an adventure, isn't it? Being with God, life with God, it's just such an adventure, and you never know what's around the corner. And all we need to do is just keep listening to Him and doing the next thing that He lays on our hearts. And then you suddenly look back, certainly with Acts435, you look back and like, wow, all these years have gone past and we've been able to help thousands and thousands of people over the years. And it's just, but if we're just doing our bit, we're one cog, and all these churches and charities are doing the work, reaching out to the individual people, and lives are changed.
I know when I spoke with your colleague, she went a little bit into how it works, that the money goes from somebody who has it to the need. But I think it might be worth touching that again. So let's just say that somebody wants a new washing machine because it's broken. This isn't like, can we have a new one, please? That'd be nice. Just explain to people that you're actually able to help and how that help is, I suppose, assessed.
Yeah. So our key mechanism is this network of partner churches and charities. So you have to meet certain criteria. You have to be a registered charity or a registered church within one of the denominations or a separate charity to partner with us. And there's obviously paperwork associated in signing them up. At that point, they are given their own login. So the requests that you see on our website are not posted by us. They are posted by the individual advocates in the church or charity, because they know who is genuinely in need. And in most cases, they're not actually putting some massive advert up saying, come and get free washing machines. They're just doing what they do. They're ministering to people. We've got charities that work with homeless people, with refugees, with ex-offenders. So whoever they're working with, they know when there's sort of a specific need, maybe someone who's an ex-offender and they need to go on a certain course to get them job ready, or perhaps it's someone who needs a bus pass to get to something. That it's in those conversations, it's relational. So it's in those conversations that they see, actually, here's someone we might be able to help. We can't help from our own charity budget because it's pretty strapped, but we can see if Acts435 can help. So then they put the request on our website. We check everyone, and if it's not got enough story, we go back, and if it's not appropriate, we'd go back. But the vast majority, yes, that's told us what we need, why they need the help, and it goes up onto our website. And sometimes our partners call it a grant, and we shoot that down, because these are not grants, these are individual donors every single day reading through our website. And some will choose by locality, because they particularly want to give in their region. Some will choose a particular category, like they want to help children or they want to help homeless people. Once a donor said that he looks through and he gives to the ones that he thinks no one else will want to give to.
Oh,
That's amazing. I love you. And then, so once the money's given, and sometimes partners say, well, what happens if it's only partially given? Well, if it was only partially given, it still would go for that person because they've committed to that story. But the wonderful news is that it's been years and years since that's happened. 100% of our needs are met. It's amazing. And most of them within 2 weeks. And so it's really fast financial help to the people who need it. And then the partner church or charity will figure out whether they accompany the person to buy the item, whether they'll give them food vouchers if it's something like that, buy them their Oyster card, whatever it might be. They deal with the practicalities their end.
I think it might be useful for people to get a grasp on not what you're doing, but I suppose this is really a bit of a screenshot of what's going on in the UK. But how many people are actually having help? What's right wording? How many requests are you getting a month?
So it's about between 500 and 600. So each partner can have 2 live at any one time, or we've got some key partners who sort of have a deeper relationship with us and they can have up to 5. So you've got maybe we do weekly reports. So on any given week, you've probably got about 100, 110 different partner churches and charities posting requests. And in that week, you may have sort of, 120 requests. It's just touching the surface, really. But for them, it's an absolute godsend because they're able to just step into all these needs, like I say, from someone who's been rehoused but's got nothing, someone who's fled domestic violence, needs new school uniform for the kids somewhere else, people who are struggling without heating, people who need transport help, people who want to get to a funeral but they've got no money to, illness, and obviously the NHS is covering the illness, but there's all these other costs associated with it, car parking, whatever it might be, so many different things. And let's face it, so we cap our needs at £200. So we are those small gifts that make a big difference. So if someone comes with £2,000 rent arrears, we're not the right place. But actually, we mustn't underestimate the difference a small amount can make. Like you said, with kids coming to school without shoes, I had heard a similar story of someone who only came to school 2 days a week. And then they went to the house to kind of find out. And it turns out that she and her mum had the same sized shoe and her mum worked 3 days a week. So on those days, she went out to work and they only had one pair of shoes that they shared between them. And you're just like, in those things, we're there. We can help. We can get you 2 or 3 pairs of shoes, honestly.
But this again comes back to, I think you've touched on that. I've been more outlandish, I suppose, but that's kind of my thing. But so much of what we can do as Christians is so simple, and we have the ability to give, but not everybody needs 100 grand to fix a problem. Some people need £5 for a bus pass to get to a funeral. If you don't have that £5, it doesn't matter how close you get to it, because if you've got £1 or you need £100, it doesn't matter. If you don't have it, you don't have it. But getting to a funeral, having that closure on a friend or a family member, being prevented. Schools, NHS, it's free. Well, actually, no, it's not. It costs a fortune in uniforms and travel. Hospitals, yeah, it's free. Well, apart from the prescriptions and the parking and so there's a lot of free help available that sometimes poverty prevents people from accessing the free help. And just being, in some ways, one of the elements of the many things you do at Acts435 is acting as a conduit for travel to be able to get the help that people need, which might be pence to most people. But if you ain't got £5 or £10, you don't have it. It doesn't matter how close you are.
I think that's it. It's difficult for some people to get their heads around actually no money at all. It's not that they're trying to make a decision between one thing and another. It's actually that there is no money in the bank. So they're managing day by day, and it just takes one thing to spin them into crisis, or like someone who's dependent on their car, and there's some people who have budgeted it all out, but then something's gone wrong with the car, and that's just such a wonderful thing to help with, because if they don't get that help, they're going to lose their job, and then the spiral, then it really does spiral out of control. But you're so right, just really small things can make a big difference. And because we see all the thank yous, you get these people saying, I can't believe a complete stranger has wanted to help me, and they're just overwhelmed. And then that's where we see some kind of think, oh wow, God's love in action, and it attracts them into the church. And we've had plenty of stories where Acts435 has been part of someone's journey to a relationship with Jesus, and it starts with that fact that someone has seen them and someone has reached out and helped them in what might feel like a very small way, but when you're not getting any help from anywhere, it makes a huge impact.
I think one of the things we've seen in the UK, and I'm going to go with 15 years, which is the time frame you've gone for, but people don't have spare money anymore. You need to have savings and pensions. I remember when pensions came in forced, and I thought, I can't afford to pay my pension. And I couldn't. We struggled. Once it was mandatory, it's like, we're not surviving now because I don't have the money for pension. And somebody with money said, well, you need your pension because when you get old, you'll have to have a pension. And I remember saying, most people in my position, in the sort of jobs I was doing back then, they don't care about reaching 60. They care about reaching tomorrow. They don't care about the pension because if they live to 65, actually they're doing pretty well because these are people who work in foundries and really hard areas. They don't care about the pension. They don't care about the future and savings. If I can buy food in the morning, hey, I've got quite a bit of money in my pocket. And I think that's something that many folk struggle to comprehend because it seems such a silly problem. Well, why haven't you got savings? Why is a pension a problem? And this is what we've seen worse than, I guess you'll have a particular take on this, but in the last 15 years, the amount of money that people have spared, disposable income, has disappeared. Holidays, people don't have holidays anymore. Well, you don't need a holiday. Actually, you kind of do, but that's actually a snapshot of a reality check. People now don't go on holiday. They don't have that spare £1,000, £2,000 for holiday. Now they're trying to eat. And like you say, it's not, do I eat or do I heat? Actually, I can't afford food and I can't afford heating. We are in such a bad place as a society. And I just don't think generally, especially in churches, which are very much more middle class, I think for the most part, far frequently, they're not grasping. When people say they haven't got money, it means not they're having a rough month. They didn't have any money last month or the last 12, and they're probably not going to have any for the next 24 months. When they say they mean we have no money, it's not, oh, I splashed out a bit on a meal out. No, they have nothing.
Yeah, and Joseph Rowntree Foundation have done a lot of work on this, and the amount of the increase in recent years of those in destitution, not just poverty, but severe poverty, and those kind of situations. You say it's easy to forget that. I remember it was quite interesting when we first came back in 2008, before I got the job, and actually even when I got the job, because it was 10 hours a week as a part-time bookkeeper, we were struggling, and our church had been giving us a sort of additional year, which didn't kind of go as far in the UK as it did in Guatemala. But we were on child tax credits, so I was at the supermarket, with my vouchers, and you had a certain amount for fruit and vegetables, but I was fine about it, but I thought, you can see the issue here. I'm like trying to figure out, have I got enough fruit and vegetables to meet my vouchers, and I'm putting that all in because it all helps, and we're living on very little a month, and our house had terrible heating, so we were always cold. And I remember thinking at one point, looking at Joseph Rowntree's minimum living standards and thinking, well, what you can do without clothes. There's a lot of things that they've got in their minimum living standards, like a certain level of turnover on clothes and furniture. But the reality is we were only in that situation for 18 months, maybe. You can survive for 18 months just wearing all the clothes you had before and everything is in good nick. But if that's always been your reality and you've never had that opportunity, then you've just got nothing to pull from. And I think that's where it just becomes where, you suddenly need a car, but you've got nothing. I mean, even passing the test, it's huge expense. And so without the help of the bank of mum and dad, as they say, with housing costs as they are, and they say it's going to get even worse because as the baby boom generation give the money and their children inherit, the inequality is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the lack of understanding of what it means to start with nothing in life and have nothing to pull on beyond your own abilities to get a job is stark. Yeah.
Yes, I think this is one of my little passionate boxes because I've been in that place of having to access a food bank, and it does give you a certain perspective on life. I've worked in some pretty hard jobs as a trucker. I've met all sorts of people over the years, But I read this the other day, which really, really struck me. I've forgotten who it was. It was someone in the 1850s talking about the idea of what's poverty and wealth. How can we sort of understand that? And they said, imagine two people who have the same job, but one man has to buy a pair of boots that might last him for a few weeks before the cardboard then is decimated at the bottom of the shoe. He's got wet feet and he's cold, and he has to buy another pair of shoes he can't afford. There's another man who buys a pair of leather boots, which last him for 5 years. His feet are never wet and cold. The man who's buying all those pairs of shoes that are rubbish probably spends more over 5 years than the man who could afford to pay for a single pair of leather boots. That is poverty and wealth. And I think that sums it up perfectly. When we had a problem in the house, we moved into it, and the previous people had energy arrears. So we had a pay-as-you-go meter thing, and we could not comprehend how expensive it was to buy electricity and gas. Now we got it switched over because we weren't the ones that got an arrears, but people don't comprehend how much more expensive it is to not have money, which sounds like a silly statement, but not having money costs a fortune. Car insurance, pay it yearly. You'll save yourself £100. What do you mean? Paying it monthly, which is what most people do, or car tax, it costs you more. Now, we understand the financial reasons for that, but being poor costs you money.
Yeah. And I always think that at supermarkets, when there's offers in the run up to Christmas and you have to spend a certain amount each week, we just bulk buy and we've got a car, so we can just, and we've got the finance to be able to do that. So you just get to the amount, bulk buy, and then you get the treat of lots of vouchers from that supermarket, and you think, but you're just helping the wealthy save money. And as you say, with the prepayment meters, it's just eye-watering, the cost of prepayment meters, but they're not able to access the other alternatives. There's some real systemic problems that need to be dealt with. But meanwhile, we try and step into the gap, big gap at the moment, with all the different needs.
For which I am very grateful, having been in the position of need in the past. We're not in that same place at the moment, but I know what it's like to have nothing. When we had a business that we had to get rid of, we had lots of debt, and for many, it's about 5-6 years, we were paying off the debts. And every month people say, "Oh, you're coming out for a meal." Well, we don't have any spare money. Oh, rough month. No, we're on a repayment plan. We never have spare money, ever. Well, what's that like? And they could not comprehend never having spare money. Oh, it's just that you've had a meal out. It's like, we never have meals. We can't afford a meal out. Oh, let's go to the cinema together. We can't afford to go. Well, why not? You overspent on this. No, there is no spare money and there is no disposable income, but trying to help people understand that principle is really, really hard when they've got savings and they can buy their car insurance yearly and they pay their car tax yearly and they plan their holiday 3 years ahead of time because it's cheaper and so on and so forth. I'm going to go off on one again. Bit of a passionate one for me. So if people want to make use of what you're doing at Acts435 and either to support it through your partner churches agencies, or because they think, well, I've got a need, Acts435 are helping people, I have a similar need, how do people either help you creating the stuff that needs to be helped for? That's really terrible English, isn't it? Listing stuff that people have needs for, as opposed to people who are thinking, I need a new washing machine or I need to get a bus pass.
So if you are the person who is needing a washing machine or a bus pass, we are not in a position to help directly. So what we would do is direct people to one of our partner churches or charities. So we have a map on our website that shows them and a listing of where they are, because, just capacity, because we're such a small team, and because that's our model. However, we would say to someone, if you are needing something and you are linked in with a church or a charity locally that isn't listed, go and encourage them to sign up. And on our website, if you go to acts435.org.uk/partner, that's where you get all the information of how you can partner with us. There's a form to fill in. We'll send you all the information. It's streamlined. We know you're all extremely busy, so we want to try and get you set up as easily as possible. But then if you want to give to a request, then it's acts435.org.uk/give.
Which is really simple. And I looked through your website last time. I thought, I just like the simplicity. I know I said that at the start. I'm not going to go off on one again because this is a bit of a soapbox. Thank you, Jenny, for what you're doing at Acts435. The work there, the fact you can help with such simple problems, and connecting people who have a simple solution to a simple problem, although the simple problem is their entire world when it goes wrong. But I love that it's just so simple. So thank you to what you're doing and the way you've evolved this movement, this organisation, from the beginnings of a little tiny scrap of an advert somewhere. Don't begrudge the church notice board.
Well, it's an absolute joy, and we've loved doing it. And yes, over the years, different people have suggested different things to try and do as part. And what we've realised is no, keep it simple. And that's what people need with our information overload world. They just need something simple, gets to the point, gets the help where it needs.
Jenny from Acts435.org.uk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy.